Welcome to the Mix Minus Picks Plus or Minus podcast, the annual affair for the 2018-19 NFL season. And joining me again, only a podcast or two later, is Tim Castano. Tim, how are you?
I'm well, thanks, Matt. How are you?
I'm pretty good. So we were just talking going into this about we probably watch the NFL as much as we watch the NBA, but we just feel more on top of the NBA. And I think maybe that's a product of how popular the NBA is and the fact that it's constantly in your face day after day. So it's almost like the student who ends up studying every day and you're a little better off at the end. Whereas now the NFL kind of has become a cram-worthy league.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Just I think the NBA seeps into us because we're reading even just an article a day, even if it's not not that in depth. And we were talking about this as well. The NBA has really become a 10-month sport, whereas it previously was maybe 6 months, 7 months, but really stretched to be a 10-month sport with the popularity of summer league and then the attention that the off-season moods get. And off-season transactions for the NBA wrap up. They're still going on in August, and that's when the NFL really is kicking off, and it probably distracts a little bit from the attention that I otherwise would be devoting to the NFL.
Yeah, it really is something. You almost come upon the schedule and the teams a little cold feeling. And maybe that's because the Giants and Jets, in terms of a local interest, are not playing deep into the playoffs, if into the playoffs at all. And I think that's a difficulty because you watch the playoffs, but you're not watching them the same way you do when the team that you root for or someone who you have some kind of rooting interest, when they're in it. It's just a little different, and you feel like your off season is a lot longer as a fan. And one point I wanted to bring up, because the way we're gonna do this, we'll go alphabetical, but of course we'll start with the two local New York teams first, because they do get the preferential treatment. They're the teams we probably know the most about, without having to delve too deep into the research. But have you noticed that people seem to have forgotten the Giants were 11-5 before this previous year? Isn't it weird? Don't you kind of sense that?
I do. I feel like they kind of look at that as an aberration just because the previous, last 4 seasons under Coughlin, they underperformed and haven't been in the playoffs. And I think the way they went out in the playoffs 2 years ago, where it was really underwhelming and they had some controversy leading up to it, maybe people look at that playoff game as being the canary in the coal mine of the McAdoo regime. And I mean, I think I've said previously on podcasts that I wasn't necessarily a fan of McAdoo with the hiring, and even though he did succeed for a little while, I still wasn't crazy about him. It could just be, people wipe away that 11-5 season because they weren't sold on McAdoo and he left such a bad taste in their mouth. I don't know, but you're right. It is kind of strange that, and it almost feels the way that team was assembled. It really was the 11-5. I think is largely attributed to the free agent acquisitions for the defense that Reese made, and then we saw that the defense last year was highly dysfunctional, and a lot of the players who were brought in turned out to be not great fits with the Giants' culture, so it seemed. So that also may contribute to perhaps some of the success from the previous season not necessarily embedding itself too much in everyone's memory.
Yeah, it sort of had that mercenary / cheap calorie feel to it, where you fill up real quick. And I often think if somebody's going to pay for a free agent, you always have to wonder to a degree why the team that they're leaving isn't willing to match or keep them. Now, that's not always the case, and it did work out that year. But of course, when you're thinking of Janoris Jenkins, I love the fact that this murder in his basement has kind of moved on.
Yeah.
What a weird thing that was. And look, it should, I guess, move on. It sounds like it wasn't him. But it's like, oh my God, hey, Jack Rabbit's out on the field. He's playing through adversity. And
wasn't someone murdered in Chris Bosh's house during the playoffs a few years ago?
Oh yeah, it was like a masseuse or something.
Maybe it wasn't a murder.
Yeah, I don't think it was.
a wrongful death or something. It was a mysterious death, but
It was.
It is surprising then that these things, then life goes on. But yeah, that was peculiar.
So why don't we start right there with the Giants? This is the team that you have season tickets to. You very nicely allow me to go once a year. And
yeah, we're looking at Tampa, by the way, unfortunately.
Well, I wouldn't say unfortunately. Is it a night game again?
It is not. They don't. They have no night games. No, I shouldn't say they have one night game, which is Philadelphia, which I didn't get. But they have 2 Monday night games, but one's in Atlanta and one's in San Francisco.
Okay, so November 18th, we're looking at. Okay, that's the Bucs. So this is the team we pay the most attention to. So we really should pay the most attention to them when we talk about them. I had better feelings about this team going into the season than what I'm seeing in what's being prognosticated, and if you want to take a bet on them, where they are. So they were a 3-win team last year. Everything went completely wrong. All the wheels fell off. And McAdoo went away, and unfortunately he did the little...
did not do so quietly.
No, he didn't. And he took Eli out for the one game, which is a real shame now, because that would have been something that was a differentiator for Eli. Now watch when we say this, something happens this year, knock on wood, but that was a real differentiator, I think, in his case. I still think he's a Hall of Famer, but there was something about that Iron Man aspect. And I hate the fact that it's gone now, even though people will be able to speak to it and say why it was, what happened there and why that happened, and that it really wasn't because of injury. So they'll make some kind of asterisk streak probably. But I felt a little better about the Giants going into this season. They got Saquon Barkley, who I think is going to be the fun new toy for Giants fans to watch, to see what he does. They locked up Odell Beckham Jr. After there was a lot of discussion about maybe trading him to the to basically the dream team Los Angeles Rams, what they've accumulated there. That would have been something else if they ended up getting him in there. And they have the offensive tools. They don't really have a line. Their front seven has dissipated a bit from years past. Their defensive backs aren't the greatest, even though they do have Landry, right? Landon. I've been doing too much research. Landon Collins. Great player.
Landry.
Jarvis Landry. I always, and it's like, and then there was that quarterback who played for the, the backup quarterback for Pittsburgh. And it's like, I don't even know with all these Landrys. So Landon Collins is tremendous. But when you look at the fact that they're a 7 win plus or minus, that makes sense when you're a 3-win team, but this was also an 11-win team 2 years ago. So I was a little, that feels very much like a tease in terms of, and I don't mean the betting tease, I mean a tease to be like, how are they going to be below 7? I think they have to be above 7, but I'll tell you what, when I went through the schedule on my first pass, because with the Giants I didn't want to overthink, I just wanted to see what I thought, I got them to 7 and 9. Mm-hmm. What did you get?
7 and 9 as well. Same thing. And it felt like an ugly 7 and 9. I was actually surprised that they'd gotten to 7 wins when I went through the schedule, because I had them on a couple of losing streaks that would derail an entire season. But when it added up, it was they had them at 7 and 9. But it was not like a hopeful 7 and 9. It didn't feel like a 7 and 9 where they were in contention in November or early December. It felt like a 7 and 9 that really was a 5 and 11 that got pulled to a 7 and 9 with a couple of wins toward the end. That's kind of the sense I had about their season. Which, I mean, to go to your opening question, are we talking about an 11 and 5 team from 2 seasons ago where everything went wrong for them last season, or are we talking about a 3 and 13 team that is rebuilding? And that's kind of what we don't know about this Giants team, and that's the uneasy part for me heading into the season. Which one are we going to get? Was last season really as bad as it appeared, or was the previous season really as good as it appeared? And maybe that's kind of the question that's lingering in a number of Giants fans' minds. Like, what is this? Yes, they've made a couple of adjustments to the offensive line, which would help, although I'm still not happy about them letting Weston Richburg go.
But they did bring in Nate Solder.
They did bring in Nate Solder, and they've moved Eric Flowers, and hopefully
the drafted player. Hernandez, right?
Hernandez seems to be, I mean, he seems like a first-round player that they got in the second round. He seems like a steal. And, it seems like through the draft, they did well on the defense. They have a new defensive coordinator who was receiving raves, and he's switching things up in terms of the scheme that they're playing. And I don't dislike anything they've done. I can't point to a single move they've made and really criticized it all that intensely. I like Shermer, what I've seen from him. I like the coordinators he's brought in. I like the draft that they had. But I just don't know. I don't know. Is this a 3-13 team that's going to improve to 7 wins? Or is this the 11-5 team that's going to regress to 7 wins? I don't know.
Well, Tim, and I know you're not a mathematician, but
yes.
11 plus 3 is 14. And then if you divide that by 2, that's 7. So maybe
that's right. Yes,
this is the middle of the two teams. You know, it's a weird thing that bothers me when I look at the position rankings, and I don't know if I love that the Giants have gotten away from a trenches team where the front 7 on offense or on defense, and then the offensive line on offense is something that you build from there out. Like, they're so skilled on the outside that it almost bothers you because, when I'm looking at their rank, they're like a 26th ranked offensive line. And will Eli even get the time? And I know he's good at taking hits and getting out of things and all that, but will he have the time to hit the offensive players? And will it almost be like a 15-yard play in a cloud of dust, like that thing they talk about with running backs? But will it almost be that with the offense? It's going to be herky-jerky because there's not going to be a precision to it because he's not going to have the ability to hit the guys with a line potentially breaking down. And when you get a Nate Solder, how is this line ranked this bad?
Don't know. I mean, I don't think the ranking of the offensive line, given the changes they've made, is valid. I think we need several more weeks into the regular season to really get a good read on the offensive line. And even, I'm going to say, from what I understand and what I hear, is that even the preseason with the changes that were made in the training camp schedule, that like these coaches feel like the first 2 games of the season, of the regular season, are still the preseason in some respects. So I don't really know if that's an accurate ranking. I agree with you. I think if they've just bringing in Solder himself and putting him there and then bringing in Hernandez, that I think should move them up. But until they do it on the field, I guess you can't necessarily justify adjusting the rankings in that way. They really don't have much of a pass rush either. When you talk about the trenches, they have Vernon, and what we witnessed from Vernon at his best really was that he can get to the quarterback, but he doesn't sack the quarterback.
He's got like warning track power.
Yes. Now he's switching. He's switching up in the scheme here, which may help him in that regard. But I don't know. I'm hoping that some of the draft picks that they picked up, that they can, and they have improved the linebacking core as well. With a free agent acquisition, and also through the draft. So we'll see. I'm less concerned. I'm more concerned about the fact that the defensive pass rush doesn't really seem to be there. Although if you look at, some of the criticism that is coming out of the preseason training camp is really that the secondary is not where it should be. And they were surprised, I guess, with when the final roster came out prior to then getting the 6 players off of waivers, that it didn't really seem like they had addressed the secondary issues as much as they should have. So I don't know. It'll be. I'm interested to see how they adapt to the new scheme and to the new defensive coordinator. That could be. We all talk about this 10 years ago, 11 years ago. How many games it took that Giants team to catch on to Spagnuolo's defense. It took them, 2.5 games until it finally clicked. So, curious to see how it works in this go around.
Yeah, you almost hope that you get that cheap calorie effect at the worst for the year 1 of the new regime. It was a little strange that they let go of Davis Webb. That didn't seem to make a ton of sense. It's almost like they're really tempting fate here with Eli's longevity. Because it's almost like when you don't have some kind of security in place, that's when it bites you.
It does, yeah. I mean, I've read all the theories as to why they did it, and some people, when looking in the rearview mirror, can say, "Oh, all the signs were there. You know, you should have seen that this is what was this would happen." I mean, Laletta they were not going to get rid of because they drafted him, and Webb was never their guy. I mean, we don't know. We weren't there. We didn't see it. All we saw was what we witnessed on the field, and Webb had a decent preseason following his shaky game against the Lions. Shaky game against the Browns, and then the good game against the Lions. You don't know. There have been crazier roster cuts in the NFL that I've seen over the years. This is not. I wouldn't put this in the top 10 craziest roster cut, but until. This has been my philosophy throughout the draft as well, and then with the roster, which is until I have a product to evaluate the current, the incoming regime, until I see it and witness it, I just have to trust them and give them a vote of confidence. So if they thought that having Davis Webb on the roster was not the right move for this Giants team heading into the season, I have nothing to hold against them.
Well, and Bill Parcells always said it right. You are what your record is, right? So at the end of the day, that is the scorecard. It is funny, though, how Davis Webb tried to buddy up to Eli so much and be the indispensable wingman. I mean, he's training with him, he's learning from him, and then all of a sudden it's like, all right, later, dude. The funny thing, though, when we talk about the line stuff, and I'm not somebody, nor are you, who is sitting there dissecting line play. I mean, we wouldn't watch football if we were doing that. It would be like watching Jason Collins and his pick percentage, right? But
yeah. I mean, you know it when it's really good, and you know it when it's really bad. But in between, it's difficult to decipher.
It does bother me a little bit, though, that the Giants play in a division which essentially corners the market on offensive lines. Like the Eagles are the 4th-rated O-line. The Cowboys are obviously number 1, but I don't know with the Travis Frederick thing, how that plays out, but they just seem like they're lock in step with that. And then even the Redskins are the 5th ranked. And there's something weird that bothers me about that in a weird, prideful aspect.
Yeah, and especially when you look at the 4 Super Bowl teams they had. I know we're going back, more than 30 years with the 86, but then the 90 team. I mean, the 90 team, essentially won the Super Bowl because of its offensive line in that game. What Jumbo Elliott did against Bruce Smith, and that was, their offensive lines were tremendous. They were celebrities in their own rights. And then the last 2 Super Bowl teams, the offensive lines were fantastic. So, yeah, I agree with you that this was like a hallmark of the Giants. This was very much part of their character. So to see them struggle and not have built it up, have it fall apart the way it did, and not have the game, the plan behind them to repopulate the offensive line is disheartening. So, and I'm not a big fan of free agent. I don't like free agent acquisitions for fundamental pieces on a team. So I don't really like free agent acquisitions for the quarterback or for the offensive line and parts of the defensive line. In terms of defensive backs, some of the skill position players, that's what I feel like free agency is for. But I feel like those fundamental pieces of a team, that's what the draft is for. And that, to me, is a sign where I think that was a weakness in Reese's drafting.
Yeah, free agency is almost like putting something on the credit card, and that's great in the moment. You don't have to actually pay it back right away, but it tends to ultimately burn you a little bit. And really, when you build up through the draft, you build the right way, and you see this in all sports, really. You build the right way, and you put yourself in a position for then a free agent to kind of help put you over the top, but you're not relying on it. I hate relying on free agents. It just scares me too much because, like you said, you want the team, you want the brain trust to have built in the right places from that very fundamental nurturing stage where you've watched someone for years, you've seen them come up, they're your guy, and then all of a sudden you're able to put them in your system, develop them. They're not a player who's been traded or is free agent, so they kind of have that naivety to them. I don't love free agency, and I think 2 years ago we saw it work, but then we saw the backside of it not work, as we said last year. Now, it's funny because if we want to kind of, well, actually, you know what? Let's just very quickly say why we kind of think we're at a 7-win thing, and that doesn't mean it's a bad year. I think you look at this Giants schedule, it's pretty tough. I mean, Jacksonville was on the doorstep of a Super Bowl. Then you go at Dallas, at Houston, and of course, me with the logistics. I love the idea of they're totally staying in Texas, right? And then you look at having New Orleans at home, who had 11 wins. Then you're at Carolina. Then you're home for Philly. Then you're at Atlanta. And then Washington is hopefully a winnable game. But sometimes if you think of the fact that that first stretch is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 games. And then all of a sudden it doesn't matter if Washington's a winnable game because you could be that far in the hole, and then you go at San Francisco, a good team on the road with a new quarterback. Now, if they were in New York, I might feel differently, but I don't feel like winnable games are not winnable when you're that far in the hole, right? And then you think of the Chargers coming in. We saw what they did last year. Remember, both teams, I think, were 0-4 at the time, or I think it was 0-4, and I think that was the game where Odell got hurt, if I'm not mistaken.
Turned around the Charger season.
That's exactly right. It turned it around, and everyone thinks they're a Super Bowl contender. But then you go to at Arizona. They don't look like they're going to be good, but you're on the road. Now, maybe Eli can think back to championships past and feel good in that stadium, but this is just a brutal schedule. Then at Baltimore is never easy late in the season. Then you're home for Kansas City. Now, I have a hard time turning against Kansas City when you think of they put a fireballer in control of the offense, and then Andy Reid is a regular season coach. At worst, that team should go 9-7, so that's going to be tough. Then Pittsburgh at home.
Wait,
oof. I'm sorry, I'm looking at Oakland. It gets worse. I'm sorry. Schedule? I'm looking at the schedule, and then once we got to, that looked way worse. So the Atlanta. Giants one is Atlanta, then Washington, and that's where I went off I did have San Francisco. Tampa Bay is potentially winnable, but then you're at Philly, home for Chicago, who now is a world beater. Then you're at Washington, home for Tennessee, at Indy, and then home for Dallas. I mean, look, nobody's schedule's easy, but this is... And look, when you're a winning team, you win games, you got to win, right? I mean, the difference between an 11 win, and I don't want to say a 3 win, but maybe an 11 win and a 6 or a 7 win is a couple of plays often here or there. But you look at that schedule on paper from last year looking ahead, man, there is no let up for a team that won 3 games. But I guess their division's so good potentially to start when you have the Super Bowl champion, and then you have the Cowboys who did not have a great season, but I think they still won 9, and they obviously won 13 the year before. Man, that's a tough schedule.
Yeah, it is a tough schedule, and that's why I'll go back to my point, which is I was surprised they even had 7 wins when I went through it, and it was not a pretty 7-win season. It was, a 7-win season where you've got like 3 losses in a row here and 2 there, and it just somehow they cobbled together the 7 wins. So I think that's what the odds makers where they have them, and I have to agree with it.
Jacksonville's a must-win game when you look at it.
It is. I know people are expecting a lot of Houston. And you're right, you just go through, and it's, playing in Carolina is not necessarily easy. Philadelphia coming in.
Wentz will be back at that point.
Wentz will be back. And Atlanta, a lot of people are picking them to go all the way to the Super Bowl this year. So, you never know. You never know which, obviously, teams that are favored can stumble. But on the flip side, teams whom you do not expect to perform well exceed expectations. So you're right. We could be looking at a Tennessee team on December 16th who is itself, like at that point, maybe has 8 wins or 9 wins and is looking at winning its division. You just don't know. Or they could be a 5-win team at that point. So there's where, and you mentioned Chicago as well. Chicago just made one of the bigger moves of the offseason just, over the past 48 hours. So that could change the complexion of that team. So what otherwise looked like a winnable game now maybe looks less winnable as a result of those changes. So you don't really know, but I'm going to stick with the 7 wins.
Now, you would probably go over, though, right, if you had to pick the over-under, just because of the team you root for? Oh, you would go under?
I would go under. I went over last year, and maybe that's I'm making a correction from
amends.
Last season. It's a corrective pick, but I would have them at under.
I just can't go under on the team I'm watching, because that would just mean so many bad things, I think, for everyone involved. And look, here's the positive side. We haven't seen Saquon Barkley play with this team. I did not love that he had a hamstring pull right away in preseason. Now, were they playing that to keep him out? I can't imagine they're doing that, because he did come right out of the gates in that first preseason game and blow it up. Preseason sucks too. I can't stand it. No one looks good to me. Everyone looks like they're dinking and dunking, but he could come out, blow things up. Obviously, we have Beckham back. Ingram's going to be really good. So the Giants come out and win 31-10 in the first game against Jacksonville, and all of a sudden you're like, okay. And then you don't know how Dallas, you don't know how Houston, but on paper, everything we hear, everything we read, all the previews, it's not a nice looking schedule. But like two games in, the league could look different, right? I mean, that's the key with the NFL. It's 16 games and a cloud of dust, as I said. So we both have them at 7. I'm going to take the over. You'll take the under. Maybe we can. I like the Colin Cowherd thing that you should always, if you're going to bet against your rooting interest, you should always pick them to lose. You should always put your money on them losing or on the under, because then you're going to win either way. You're either going to win money or you're going to win because your team won. Yeah. So you might have the right thought there. So let's go to the Jets. The Jets are really going to be fun, I think. It's really exciting. We talked about having the new toy with Saquon Barkley and the Giants. Boy, having a new toy at quarterback. And I really like what Sam Darnold's about. I always have. Watched him a lot in college. I liked what I saw in preseason, even though preseason just, again, it's almost like watching a player in college and trying to prognosticate how they'll look in the NFL. It just doesn't feel right. But he's got something. He's young. And I think the most fascinating thing to this is that the Giants could have had him, and we're going to watch him in the same city, no matter how great Saquon is. If Sam Darnold is a franchise quarterback for 15 years, if he does what Eli's done, that's going to be a tough one to swallow.
It will be. And I know there are a lot of Giants fans who already are castigating the regime for not having taken Darnold, and I know it flies against conventional wisdom, but I have to trust them until I have a reason not to trust them. And right now I have neither a reason to trust them, not to trust them, so I'm going to lean in the direction of trusting them.
What would you have done?
Good question. I probably would have taken Sam Darnold, to be honest.
Yeah.
I just think I'm probably more risk averse just because you don't know. You don't know if you're going to be in that position again to get a quarterback like that again. And, we do remember what it was like between the retirement of Phil Simms and the arrival of Eli Manning. Yes, they went to a Super Bowl with Kerry Collins, but, we went through Danny Cannell and Dave Brown and Ken Graham and, Kerry Collins, and it was there was no stability there. So to get stability, we take for granted what it's like to have stability at that position. Having said that, you don't know what next year holds either in the draft and where the Giants will be picking. And, I looked at this a little bit, what teams are out there who may be interested in a quarterback in next year's draft. And based on where we are today, not that many, maybe 4, maybe 5. So they could possibly position themselves again toward the top of the draft to get a quarterback they're more interested in. I don't know, but I probably would have taken Darnold, to be honest.
That was a tough one. It's a brutal call because having the great running back is like having the second Tesla. It's like it's awesome to have it. You take it out on the road on a Sunday, on a Labor Day. You're like, oh, this is everything. And I love Saquon as much as anybody. And if Eli were 31, I would just be like, oh my God, this is just no doubter. But if something happens to Eli, or even if he plays 4 more years, that would be amazing if he did. And I really hope. I love Eli. But let's say he played 2 years. Like you said, you're in a position now where you don't have anybody there to get the ball to these people. Now, Saquon can be great. They can run to the ground. But running backs are very much a luxury in some ways. And they can The majority of running backs who are at a high level, and there's plenty of them, it seems, can approximate the value of the elite. Whereas quarterbacks, it just doesn't work that way. The drop-off from Tom Brady to Case Keenum is immense.
It is immense, and it's a quarterback's league. So if you can get somebody, look, I am not a Giants fan who roots against the Jets. I don't at all. So I like to see the Jets do well, and I'd like to see Sam Darnold do well. I think it's good for everybody when both teams are playing or are competitive.
Oh, it's great here.
Yeah, and like I'm happy for Bowles as well, because I know people were running him out after his second season, and for him to have sort of weathered that and hopefully manage what will be a more successful season, I think that's great. And there is something to karma. We talked, I think, when we did the podcast last season. I mean, everyone believed that the Jets were tanking, yet they remained competitive throughout the season. I mean, they lost a lot, and they ended up picking toward the top of the draft, but then traded to get even higher. But they
were 3-2.
And they kept playing for their coach throughout the entire season, and that says something to me. So for them to have played the way they did and still get the player that they wanted, I'm happy for them. And I'm happy to see them do well. Now, I guess they're at 6 wins. I have them at over. I've got them at 7.
I have them at 5.
Oh, really?
I got them 5-11, and I'm it's an exciting 5-11, whereas last year was a downer kind of 5-11, a transitional 5-11. It was hard for me to give him wins, and he could be really good, but just like we talk about the Giants last 2 years, where they were tremendous one and then they dropped off the next, Sam Darnold had a lot of that the last 2 years in college. He was unbelievable 2 years ago, and then he fell off a bit last year. Now he lost a lot of skill players. He was trying to do a lot on his own, so he had some turnover problems. I'm totally in on watching him. It might not be the worst thing for them, though, to go 5-11 and get another pick, even though that's not good for Bowles and McCagnon. And they've done a lot right. It's almost like for Bowles and McCagnon, you wish they were starting like last year was their first year together. Because they've almost used up a lot of the goodwill in some ways at this point, and then even got to 10 wins that first year, but didn't make the playoffs. That's the worst. Like if they made the playoffs that 1 year, then it resets things. So they're in a tough position because they sort of need to win, but I give them a lot of credit for, with that said, and they must feel like they have some comfort. Because isn't Woody like the ambassador to Ireland or something now? But they're
United Kingdom, I think.
United Kingdom. They're in a position where they must feel like they have some security. Because to name Sam Darnold the starter when Teddy Bridgewater was there and was doing very well, and McCown was pretty decent last year. I like the move, and I'm not down on that 5-11. Where I'm very down on the Giants 7-9. But I look at their schedule, and I just think it's hard right off the bat. You're at Detroit, home for Miami. You should win. You're at Cleveland. You're at Jacksonville. I had 2-2, pretty much right there if you can find it. And I think, look, I'm going to have a hard time with Denver. We'll get to those teams. It's hard to kind of see where there's a difference. But Indy, we talk about it being a quarterback league. It's a hard place to not make Indy a 9 or 10 win team, even though I don't think I went there. A great quarterback just changes everything if they're healthy. But Minnesota should be tough. Now you're at Chicago, you're at Miami. Buffalo's winnable, but then your New England they're just always going to beat you, although maybe Darnold changes that, right? But then you're at Tennessee.
I think they're going to get one from the Patriots this season.
Yeah, then you're at Tennessee, you're at Buffalo, Houston, then Green Bay's tough, then you're at New England. I just was like, I was having a hard time without... Look, after one game, I could revise things because you know how that is when you see the player in a real NFL game where he's playing all 4 quarters and you just see him kind of run the team and it has that look and you know it, and all of a sudden I might change everything. But even Wentz had a tough first year in I think after the first Goff. 5. Yeah, Jared Goff as well. So I think that always has to be taken for granted, no matter how great a quarterback could be. Even Peyton Manning, right? Wasn't he 3-13 or something the first year?
Yeah, he had a tough first season.
So they got to learn that. So I'm having a hard time getting above that 6-win mark. So I do have them at the under, but it's kind of a hopeful under. but that's just sort of where I feel things are. Are you? I mean, you must be excited to watch Sam Darnold locally on a weekly basis.
Oh yeah, definitely am, and I'm not expecting him to have like Ben Roethlisberger's rookie year. I'm expecting something closer to Peyton Manning's first season, but I think they will. I think they're actually going to be around like 2-2. They're going to start stronger than people expect. I think they'll pick up a couple of good wins early, and then I expect like toward the end they're going to surprise people with a couple of wins as well. And then in between, they'll get their 3 wins. So that's why I sort of have them at 7. I think it'll be fun to see. I think the Jets. I like all their moves from top to bottom. Whereas recent seasons you could argue with why are they going in that direction when I thought they were rebuilding. Whereas here it seems like they're finally moving in the right direction. It'll be good to see. I think it'll be fun.
It's funny, Teddy Bridgewater is playing the Kurt Warner role with Eli, but he's just playing it earlier, and he was not as prolific. But it's crazy that Bridgewater is only 25 still. I couldn't believe that when I saw it.
I feel bad for Teddy Bridgewater. Obviously, I think a lot of people do because I think he was fairly beloved in Minnesota by his fellow teammates, and he had that terrible injury. I mean, people were crestfallen for themselves and also for him.
It was like 2 years ago, a couple of days ago.
Yeah, and then for him to work so hard to get back to where he is, and obviously Minnesota had to do what they had to do with Kirk Cousins, but I'm hopeful that he gets another shot somewhere. I don't think it's going to necessarily be in New Orleans, but I felt like he took the deal he did with the Jets for that reason, was to try and get his shot and showcase himself. Not for the long term, but hopefully with the next stop being the long term. It would be good. I do hope for him that he finds a home.
I do too. Yeah. No, he was a good camper, and I heard someone say that the Jets got a 3rd-round pick for a guy they spent maybe $1 million on, was it, or even maybe less?
Yeah,
it might have been $500,000 at this point that they actually paid out, and then everyone gave the Browns all that credit last year for the Osweiler move,
Osweiler pick, yeah.
And they gave $16 million to get a 3rd-round pick. The poor Browns, who I don't have any sympathy for anymore after watching this Hard Knocks. But so you're over on the Jets. I'm under. You're under on the Giants. I'm over. Very interesting locally. It will be fun to watch, though, because I can't wait to see Barkley. Barkley will be phenomenal to watch probably for the next 2 years, where it might look like he is jumping Darnold, like he's just like the feats he does on the field. And have we figured out? Have they talked about that he's going to return at all? I haven't heard that really.
No.
He's tremendous. He's a tremendous pass catcher. There will be these Eli Manning screens that go for 90 yards.
He's going
to
give them what they hoped that Shane Vereen would have given them, but unfortunately, it didn't work out.
That's right. I hope he doesn't get the Shane Vereen injury thing that's been with the Giants now.
Yeah. And I think what we're going to be looking at with the Giants and the Jets is quite possibly the race for Offensive Rookie of the Year. You could have Darnold and Barkley going at it head-to-head, because I've seen some people actually pick Darnold as Offensive Rookie of the Year, where I've seen many people pick Barkley to be the Offensive Rookie of the Year. So it'll be interesting to watch that.
Yeah, probably just for the access to it and the ability to look great at it. I feel like Barkley will win Offensive Rookie of the Year. He's just that good and ready to go, and everything the Giants have. And Darnold he's allowed to struggle a little. It's shocking he's only 21. That's why such a hard time.
He's going to be the youngest opening day quarterback in history.
He just seems to have it right.
Not the youngest starter ever. Any guess at who the youngest starting quarterback in NFL history is? I read this today.
I mean, is it recent?
In your lifetime.
Oh, in my lifetime. Wow. No, go ahead. I can't even.
Tommy Maddox.
Tommy Maddox.
That
was before the XFL, right?
Oh yeah, this is when he was in Denver.
Wow, Tommy Maddox.
But he did not start game 1 of the season.
Oh boy. All right. So we did Giants and Jets about a half hour, which I was expecting. Mm-hmm. So now we'll do the piece where we spend 3 hours going through the rest of the league. No, just kidding. I think we could probably do this kind of rapid fire, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think so.
Arizona Cardinals, right off the bat, I don't know about you. I have a hard time accepting that they're an awful team. I have a real hard time with it. I need to allow myself to give into it and give it up, because they won 8 still last year when they were the carcass of the team who would win 10, 11. And we are always wrong on them, I feel like, the last couple of years. But they are a 5.5 over-under. And if you pick the over, you win money. So you win a lot of money. You don't have to put up money to win it. I have them going 5-9, though. I could see 6 wins, but it's just I just ran into this piece that it's hard to bet against Arizona. Though I think it's going to transition to Rosen's team. This might be the true Kurt Warner to Eli type of deal. Even though
Sam Bradford.
Yeah, even though Kurt went to Arizona eventually. But I just really think that that's the only reason I would go on the under at 5-9, because if they make that transition, they're going to lose, and their schedule is tough enough.
I have them at just slightly over at 6 and 10, which I think says more about some of the teams they'll be playing, and less than it does about them, because you're right, we don't know. They could be making a quarterback switch midseason. We have a new head coach. You have the remnants of, a team that has been actually pretty competitive over the last 5 years. That they've actually been a team I was hoping would break through under Arians, and maybe if not for a couple of things here or there, they would have broken through. I think there's enough traces of the roster left over from the Arians regime that they can get them to the 6 wins, and plus, their schedule is tough, but. I see 6 wins there for them. Yeah,
which is, we're pretty much in the same ballpark. And a lot of people have said Rosen is just as good as anybody else. He might be the most pro-ready.
Polished, yeah.
So look, they're in a nice environment in terms of the climate. So he might get a good run. They're not really playing in other places that are that brutal. And actually, although they are at Green Bay week 13. See, it's funny. You look at the schedule and you're like, if things don't go right, where do they move Rosen in? So they should beat Washington. Then they're at the Rams. Then they're home for Chicago. I love how all of a sudden Chicago's good in my mind. But then they got Seattle, at San Francisco. You got to wait almost till, it's tough. You almost have to wait till the first home game with San Francisco.
They usually like to do it after a bye with a rookie quarterback or any quarterback change.
That's true, but only I would almost think, like, do you go week 8 because it's kind of halfway, and because you got out of Minnesota at Minnesota and then Denver with those defenses?
Their bye is early.
No, Arizona's week 9.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm looking at it wrong.
That might be kind of early. Like that could be about midway, but then you go to Kansas City. You almost don't want to throw, even though, didn't the Giants throw Eli into Baltimore? Wasn't that his first? Can't recall. I remember that was really early, and that was very tough. But there's never a good time. But that's the only reason I think they could go on the under. But man, it is hard because they still have David Johnson. They still have Larry Fitzgerald at like 35 or something. Speaking at McCain's eulogy. It's like, oh my goodness. So, all right. So we're pretty close, but you have a little more of the Arizona kind of good feelings going on there. Next, Atlanta. So they won 10 last year, and they're a win total over under at 9, which it's hard to get win totals that go much higher. So you can't really look at 9 and think that it's a bad thing. But people forget. Look, they won that game in L.A. To start in the wild card round, and then they just had that awful-looking game, trench warfare against Philadelphia, which, when you look back, what a brutal loss that was. And then they had like the 4 downs close to the goal line, from what I remember. But it was not pretty last year with Steve Sarkisian in the offensive coordinator chair after Shanahan left to go to San Francisco. But it was not pretty. It was really hard. It was like a sludge moving ahead. It wasn't great. That said, they have so much offensive talent, and I still do have them going 10-6 because I think if they don't go 10-6, that's an unbelievable failure.
Yeah, I have them at 10-6 as well. For all the reasons you said. I mean, they're a consistently good team. The fact that they came back last year and made the playoffs after what they went through the previous year in the Super Bowl said a great deal to me. There's probably going to be some talk, I think, midway through the season about how Atlanta could be the first team to ever play a home Super Bowl because they hope Super Bowl's in Atlanta this year. And who knows, maybe some people will be thinking Atlanta's going to be hosting the NFC Championship game and then the Super Bowl. I don't have them there. I don't have them as the number one overall seed, but I do have them winning NFC South, and I do have them at 10 wins.
They got a tough schedule, but that's because their division is pretty brutal.
It is tough. You don't
on last year.
Yeah, Carolina and New Orleans probably will be very good. You don't know what you're going to get out of Tampa, but
and you're at Pittsburgh. You're playing the AFC North, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people, there's a back and forth between how people think Cincinnati's going to go. A lot of people think that on the face of it that they're going to be a garbage team in a rebuild, and a lot of people are like, no, they still have the infrastructure of a team that can win 10 games. So it's not pretty. And then I love cross-referencing schedules, and then all of a sudden you're looking at a Week 7 matchup with the Giants going there, and you're like, man, I hope the Giants season isn't resting on that game on turf. In Atlanta.
Who's better, Julio Jones or Odell Beckham Jr.? That'll be. I can already see the package for the Monday night game.
That's exactly right. So yeah, we're both at 10. I think that's a fair assessment. I'd say on that one, I would almost bet that one, to be honest, because I look. I mean, you can't account for people getting hurt, but what they have, if they don't go over 9. That's pretty bad. And if they hit 9, don't you get a push? Don't you get like half your money back or something? I don't know.
Yeah, and I feel like in that division you have to win. You got to get 10 wins to win the NFC South.
Yeah, and it's very possible they could get 11. It's very possible they could get 11 or 12. Like I think getting to 10 was a conservative, giving them losses where I don't think it's even necessary.
Agreed.
Next one, the Baltimore Ravens. This is always a tough one. This is almost an Arizona type one, and they have the young quarterback coming up.
Be the third string quarterback, apparently.
That's right, after RG3.
Mm-hmm. Who played well.
Yeah, no, he's So Baltimore, they won 9 last year. I don't remember I think your mom passed away during the time of our last time we would do the podcast to talk about last year. But so we probably should have had our records going into this just to talk. I think I might have been one game over or under 500.
I did atrociously. I don't think a person could do as poorly as I did. And the only upside is that I've learned absolutely nothing between last year and this season about football. So
no, it makes you feel worse. It makes you feel worse because you're like, well, what am I? I'm watching these games more than anybody.
Yeah,
but I guess we're watching with our hearts instead of our minds.
I was a year too early on Jacksonville. So the previous season I was very high on Jacksonville, and they disappointed me. And you picked them correctly last season, whereas I didn't go down that road again, which I should have. And I was way too high on the Giants. I was way too completely underestimated the Bills. Which a lot of people did, but I did not. And then I overestimated Miami for some reason, which still, I don't know what I was thinking at that point. But I had a terrible time last season.
Yeah, you don't want to overestimate them. So Baltimore ended up with 9 wins, though there was that magical Hail Mary from Andy Dalton, which he is still a beloved figure, the most beloved quarterback in the history of Buffalo after Jim Kelly. He counts on their list of quarterbacks since Jim Kelly. But
yes.
After that Hail Mary, they should have really had 10 wins, and they should have been in the playoffs, right? So they ended up at 9, and this year they're at 8. I actually have them going 9-7. Again.
I have them 7-9.
You have them 7-9, and then
I have 7-9.
Yeah, Sports Illustrated had them 7-9. But it's funny because you look again. I talk positional rankings. So their front seven and their DBs are both ranked 7. That's pretty good. They don't have a ton on wide receiver, tight end. They're sort of, Joe Flacco's still there. But I'm interested to see if, much like Nick Saban is trying to do at Alabama with Tua Tagovailoa, however you say his name, and Jalen Hurts, I think it might be interesting for Baltimore to have like 10 plays for Lamar Jackson, because he's going to have to learn to not get hit, but he's so electric, it's scary. And if you throw him almost as like a wildcat kind of fold.
Wildcat, oh my God.
Remember that?
10 years later, the Wildcat.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you throw him in some kind of fold, because he can throw, and he can, his running is unbelievable. You get him in the game somehow. I could see them shaking some things up, because it's going to scare opponents if he's got to be accounted for, if he's got any kind of game plan going there. So I do have them going 9-7 because they just have an infrastructure. And I also felt like their schedule wasn't horrendous.
Yeah, it's not horrendous. I think I probably have them at 7-9 just because I do have them losing to Cleveland, which would not have happened last year. So they were 9-7, but and I think I gave them another loss with their schedule. So I just have them at 7-9. I just feel like they're kind of treading water a little bit. It's are they rebuilding? Are they trying to be competitive? I mean, it's always difficult to count them out because they are such a solid franchise from owner, GM, coach. They know what they're doing, so there's no reason not to have confidence in them. But I just feel like there's nothing about them that says to me they're going to be in contention for a playoff spot this year. I just think 7-9 is what they are.
But isn't it funny that they're not that different than might be what you thought last year?
No, but I think that's the point. I think Cleveland's a little bit better, so they're going to get one win from Baltimore, so that takes them from 9-7 to 9-8. To 8-8, and then I have them. They have to play the Falcons, which is not easy, and they have to play.
Yeah, I actually, even though I said they didn't have a tough, I wrote in my notes tough schedule, so I kind of. I had that for Buffalo actually. Sorry. Baltimore is what.
And Kansas City is not going to be an easy game. They have to go to San Diego, or San Diego comes there. I forget. That's not an easy game. So,
L.A. Tim, not San Diego.
Oh, sorry. I know.
So it's not that terrible. It's in a soccer stadium. No, I'm kidding.
I just have all of any relocation that has occurred in any sport over the last however many, like 25. The one that feels like just that should never happen to me was San Diego, the Chargers going to LA.
It's almost like Brooklyn. It's like the Nets going to Brooklyn.
Yeah, exactly. I just feel like that's the one I'll never get used to. So I'll probably be calling them the San Diego Chargers from sometime in 2030.
They just need. They can still go back. They can still go back. They should go back. But another thing I wanted to bring up. I don't know if I've seen this from any other NFL teams. You see this in college all the time, where they have an offensive coordinator, the passing game coordinator, and then the running game coordinator, which freaks me out. It's almost like a leverage buyout company. Like it's too many levels. So they have Marty Morningweg as the offensive coordinator, and then they have Greg Roman. Remember him? The run game coordinator.
San Francisco.
So they're saying that there's a lot of tie-in there with what he did with Kaepernick and running quarterbacks. So maybe he can get something going with Lamar Jackson. I think Lamar Jackson is just he's so electric, and he just has to learn how to not get destroyed and be like decapitated, because he doesn't. That part is so different from college to the NFL. But it's funny because did you see the Louisville played Alabama this week, and I was like, man,
it did not go well.
They were hoping so bad that Lamar Jackson was still there, because that would have been a little more interesting at that point. But yeah, he is there. So we have a lot of disagreements this year. It's going to be fun.
Mm-hmm.
Not by a lot, but
not big disagreements.
Just in terms of money. So Buffalo Bills. I don't remember if I was over, but I was more positive on them than I think you were
last year.
Last year.
I thought they were going to be like a 3-win team last year.
Yeah, so they won 9 last year, and that was a real, like, extending yourself to get to 9. It was sort of like those Washington Redskins Kirk Cousins teams where they're extended hard, and you're like, man, they're elite, and the best they can do is 9. They pushed to get to 9. Now their number is 6, and I actually have them at 5-11 because the quarterback's going to be a mess, the quarterback situation. They've
lost other talent.
And their schedule is brutal. Like at Baltimore, you got the Chargers coming in early when it's warm. At Minnesota, at Green Bay, you got Tennessee coming in. At Houston, at Indy with Andrew Luck. New England, Chicago coming in. At the Jets. I just thought this schedule was brutal, and I almost didn't give them any chance to win towards the end because their will would be sapped. So it doesn't mean anything for the future and where they see themselves going ahead after this season. But I thought, 1, the schedule, and 2, the quarterback situation, which they've announced they're going to start Nathan Peterman from the Seinfeld television show. And then they're going to, at some point, Josh Allen will take over because we saw what happened last year when Nathan Peterman, I think, came in, was it in the Rams, and he threw 5 interceptions.
Yes.
Where do you have them?
I had them at 5-11 as well. I know. I mean, the tendency for me would be to correct last year's mistake because I was so off on them. But I agree. I think they've lost a good portion of, not just, I know they made the switch quarterback and they made the right move at quarterback, but I think they've also lost other talent throughout the roster. And I just see them at 5-11 with a very, very difficult schedule. I mean, you saw the Chargers of Los Angeles, Packers, they play the Texans, who I believe are going to be very good. And of course, AFC East, they've got some challenges there. And I think the Jets are better than they were last year in the AFC. Miami will be marginally better, but I just think that this is looking like a 5-11 team. And but I think it's a 5-11 team that is moving in the right direction. Well,
and when I was talking about bowls, if he got into that playoff that first year, how much it means? Look at what it means for that head coach. Who?
He bought himself another 2 seasons at least.
Absolutely, he might have bought himself 5 seasons with that drought. And he really came in and just took over after the mess that Rex Ryan left. So it's always good to make the playoffs. Next up, we have the Carolina Panthers, who came back, surprised some people. They got to 11 wins. They got Christian McCaffrey in the mix last year. And I think a lot of us felt like they would be more of a middling team, much like they were the year before. Was it only the year before that they went to the Super Bowl? Because it's crazy how quick time goes. But
2015 season.
They did jump up. And it's funny because the difference, we were saying the difference between an 11-win team and a 7-win team is a couple of plays. The difference between like a 9-win and an 11-win team is so minute. It's like 1 win at the end. Because remember that year when the Giants won 11, didn't they win at Washington when they didn't have to at the end of the season? And it was like, they're an 11-win team. And I felt like Carolina was that kind of team. Now they are at 9. You would make money on the under. So people are thinking they're going to be better than 9. I have them at 10-6 because they showed me a lot last year. They still have Cam in control. They got Norv Turner now. Watch out.
I'm a big Norv Turner fan.
And I think McCaffrey will be good. And they have enough skill positions. And look, we talked about it being a quarterback league. Cam is not the highest of the highest level, but he is a winning quarterback, and he's a leader.
Oh, I'm a big fan of Cam Newton's. Very big fan of his. And having said that, though, I think that this, and also Ron Rivera. Ron Rivera does not get enough credit for having such a competitive franchise for as long as he has. And let's not forget, they do have a new owner who is former New Jersey resident Dave Tepper. David Tepper is now the owner of the Carolina Panthers.
Who else did he want to buy?
I don't know.
By the way, they brought in as their president the former CMO of the Nets, who hired me, Tom Glick, who went over to England to run a couple of Premier League teams for the last decade.
Okay. That's also good. So I like to see Carolina do well. I have them at 9-7 though, which says less about how well I think they're going to perform and more about I think their division that they're playing in and the nature of their schedule. I just think I look at it and I think there might be a couple of like surprise losses where you think that Carolina is going to win, but they actually end up losing. And
sort of like the flip side of last year.
Yeah, and so for instance, like Seattle, we don't really know what Seattle's going to be like. Everyone's expecting a down year, but I could see Seattle going into Carolina and winning, and I could see them maybe going into Detroit and losing. So to your point, yes, it is it's razor thin between 9 and 11, but I have them at the 9 now.
Tim, is it Gotham City over there?
Yeah, it is. I know.
What's going on?
When you live right near the fire department, that's what happens.
All right, so I'm on the over, and you are at the push. Would you go under or over if you had to? If you had the proverbial gun to your head?
Oh, that I would go over.
Yeah, it's hard to go. It's hard to say they're going to win 8. That's the problem with a strict number.
I think that there's. I trust Rivera too much and trust Cam Newton too much, and to say that they're an 8-win team, but I have them at 9.
I feel like people should always go on the half. Like they should always give you a half so you can go either or on a win. The Chicago Bears won 5 last year, and they're at 6.5 this year. They did add Khalil Mack, although I do have to say Khalil Mack was on the same Raiders team that both won 10 and then lost however many they lost last year. So to think he's just going to come in and take over, it doesn't work that way. And remember the last time the Bears did this, they got Julius Peppers.
Yes.
That never ends up being the true thing that takes over. Like you still have to have a team, and then that is like the cherry on top, and all of a sudden makes the big plays. But the Bears are just in this weird state. Don't you feel like you never see the Bears on TV? Like you never watch them like play after play? They just seem to be in this weird nether state of the NFL, almost like they're relegated. I have them 6-10 though.
I have them 6-10 as well. I know people are very excited about the Mac trade, and they're very excited about Trubisky's progress. I think that he's going to have a Goffian transformation from year one. From year 1 to year 2. Do you have a new head coach? And I just never felt like John Fox was a good fit there. And I like John Fox a lot. I wish like John Fox had taken a year off between Denver and his next job. I wish he hadn't jumped into Chicago the way he did. But I sound like I'm his doctor or something. But I'm not sold on Chicago, even with the Mac trade. And I know that they have a lot of other talent on the defensive side of the ball up front, and that should be imposing to the NFC North teams. But I just feel maybe I'm just allowing a historical bias to infect my opinion of them this season, but I have them at 6.
Well, and they always have that mythological coordinator. Can you think of him right off the top of your head? Everyone always talks the Vic Fangio defense.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
So now, wasn't he in with Fox? And did they keep him, or where was he before? It's always the Vic.
He was in San Francisco.
Okay, so it's like Vic Fangio. Watch out! Here we go with the.
By the way, I've been reading after after Michigan's loss to Notre Dame in the first week of the season, that everyone's already predicting that Jim Harbaugh is going to be an NFL head coach next year. So who knows? Maybe Vic Fangio will go with him there.
Vic Fangio. It's like, oh my God, I love that, the mythological coordinators who just will teams to win and have like a top 4 defense. It's like watch out when Khalil Mack gets thrown on his schemes. It's like, no, Khalil Mack will be okay, guys. Let's he's going to shoot the A gap like you've never seen. It's just such a silly thing. All right, so we're both 6-10. We're both under, and it's going to be it'll be fine. And look, Mitch Trubisky's allowed to have an amazing progression this year. It's always possible. He did look like he was struggling a bit last year, although you do read he's tremendous, like Russell Wilson level on the run throwing. So that's always a possibility that he could be that. But
well, I mean, they need him to be great because I got fleeced by San Francisco on that trade. So
that's very true. Next up, we got the Cincinnati Bengals, who are always a tough out no matter who they have. And look, they always have a lot of skill players up and down the lineup. And it's funny because everyone's always like, I remember when we did our NBA podcast and we were joking about how it was like the Nets when they had Sean Livingston. When he gets back, it's going to make us run. We're going to be fine. Everything with Cincinnati's like, when Tyler Eifert's back, watch out. We're going to be great. But they're just a well-run team. There's a lot of stability with that team. They had a bit of a down year at 7. They're 6.5 though this year. So I actually have them going 7-9, which would be on the over. A lot of people actually have them, people in the know, kind of contending for the AFC North, if you think about it. And look, why not? They're only years from being, I mean, they never win a playoff game, but they get there. So I thought that was almost a lock type over to have a nice 6.5 number there. That was recency bias as to how last year went. I think they can overproduce that. So I got them to 7-9. I think kind of conservatively.
Yeah, I have pretty much the same evaluation. I have them at 8-8, but almost had them at 9-7 and almost in the playoffs. Very close to it, but just couldn't do that based on what their schedule is. And very happy they brought back the head coach. They have consistency there, and you're right, they have a lot of skilled players. I'm higher on Andy Dalton than other people are. I know last year people were trying to run him out of town, but I'm much higher on his play, and it's one of those cases where, like, if he were gone, I think Cincinnati fans would be crying for Andy Dalton to return. So be careful what you wish for, and be grateful for what you have. But even with all those things, I feel like things have to go very well for them to get to 9-7. Things just have to go well for them to get to 8-8. If that makes any sense. But I'm comfortable with them at 8-8. I just couldn't get comfortable with them at 9-7.
Would you rather have Andy Dalton or Kirk Cousins?
Good question. Probably Kirk Cousins.
Yeah.
Probably Kirk Cousins, but I have to think about it.
It's tough, though. And that's funny because think about, look, Andy's got the money, though. He got a huge contract, so I guess I can't say that he's undervalued. But it is interesting. You get to those levels, and I think we'll get to Minnesota, there's an expectation almost that he's this savior, and I think that's a dangerous position for Andy. Cleveland. Last year I went over, and I'm really afraid to go over ever again on Cleveland. So
wait, were they over, though? Did they hit it?
Were they over -0.5? Because,
yeah, exactly.
I don't know. But yeah, it's funny to see in the list last year's 0 wins and won the year before, and now they're at a 5.5. And I think that's just because of the bettors out there. And people will say, "Oh, because they're on Hard Knocks." Have you watched Hard Knocks? Because
I've not.
I'm running as far as I can from 5.5 wins. Watching this Hard Knocks is it's compelling. It's, all reality television at its highest level has to be compelling like this because it is tough to watch. It is cringeworthy. Hugh Jackson, I thought he was this quarterback whisperer. I wish he'd whisper a little more because when he speaks out loud, it's like, what is going on here? And then you got Todd Haley, you got Greg Williams. It is a combustible mess. Now, they do have an immense amount of talent, and whoever comes in next as the coach and brings their group of coordinators, maybe Jim Harbaugh goes there, because whoever's coming in next has just a wealth of talent and players who are ready to be coached at the highest levels. I don't think they are right now. That said, I feel like 5.5 is high. I do have them going 4-12 this year. Again, saying that I did get burned last year. But I think it's going to be tough. We're going to see some improvement from certain players. I think Myles Garrett's going to come out. He was injured early last year, I believe, which really never got him right into the season. He was always catching up. But I think he's going to be just tremendous. Eventually, Baker Mayfield's going to play, but the fact that he's not starting scares me. Why put Tyrod, or as he said in this show, his name is really Tyrod. I don't know if that's a joke, and if they're joking, that scares me too about a team. But why put him out there? Why let him play? Just let Baker play. You went all in on him. Let him play. If the Jets are playing Darnold, you can play when they had Bridgewater. I mean, if I'm Cleveland and I had Bridgewater, I might play him. And nothing against Tyrod. He got 9-7 last year. But just play him. So the fact that there's that kind of uncertainty about who's going to play when, there's uncertainty with Hugh Jackson. He knows he kind of has to win this year or he's going to be out of a job, I think. But like he doesn't have the horses to win. So there's a lot of uncertainty that I think is going to get them to 4 more wins than last year, which in most cases is a tremendous step up. But everybody watch Hard Knocks. I'm sure a lot of people have. I cannot believe what I'm watching at times. It is that crazy. But they do have Jarvis Landry. They have some different players they can play. They had the one guy. First of all, Tim, the most impressive guy in this show, what was his name? Michael something. I forget his name. They got him from Philadelphia. This guy shows up on tape because they're going to play Philadelphia in a preseason game. He gave the greatest scouting report I think I've ever heard from a coach even. And then the other day I see the thing come out. He was
cut.
He was prosecuted for insider trading.
Oh, that's right.
So he's gone. He was the best thing on the team. So, look, 4 wins is a major improvement. I have them going 4-12, though. I think when you go 1-15 and 0-16, you got to do a lot before you start putting wins on the board. So I'm under.
Yeah. Okay. I have them under as well, but I have them at 5.
Wow, look at you.
Yeah, I got them at 5. Based just on their schedule, I also think they can sneak up on people toward the end of the season. And teams with younger talent like they have, and they did play throughout the entire season last year. It wasn't like they rolled over. And they do, when you look at the roster top to bottom, like, okay, there's some talent there, and there's some talent there. And especially when it's younger talent, it can sneak up and surprise somebody toward the end of the season, like a week 14 or a week 15 game. And I think that's going to happen to them. So I agree, like they'll be at like maybe 3 wins heading into November, or late November, but then maybe pick up the final 2 surprise fashion. But I saw a little bit of Baker Mayfield in his preseason game against the Giants, and what do you know? What does preseason really tell you about someone? I liked what I saw, though. I really liked what I saw. I liked how the way he held the ball, how he made decisions, when to use his feet, when he didn't use his feet, when he hung in the pocket. All positive signs. So
he's a leader too.
Yeah. So if I were a Cleveland fan, I would be. I mean, when they picked him first overall, I was like, why are they picking him first overall? Pick Barkley and Baker Mayfield would be there at 4th, or if not Baker Mayfield, you can get Rosen, or you can get Darnold, or you can get somebody there at 4th. But they really zeroed in on him. He was their guy, and hopefully he turns out to be that way for the Browns. I also was surprised that they went with Denzel Ward as opposed to Bradley Chubb.
Yeah.
With the 4th overall pick, but again, it is a passing league, so I could see why they want to strengthen their secondary. I think there's enough talent there for 5 wins. But if you told me it's only going to be 4 wins, I wouldn't argue with you. So, but I think we're both on the under, so we should be safe.
Well, and you bring up a good point. They might especially be scuffling for wins at the end if Baker's now in, and it is his start of the season in some ways. Mm-hmm. Because they're only probably going to give Tyrod 4 games, maybe, unless he's winning, right? But I mean, or maybe the way to say it is probably only going to give them 4 losses, or give him 4 losses.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. If you tell me there are 3 wins on Thanksgiving, I think they're about where I thought they would be.
Fair enough. Next up, in division, the Dallas Cowboys. They won 9 last year, and they're right at 8.5 this year. I do have them going 9-7, though I wrote, I'm not sure where I stand on them, because we've almost forgotten how unbelievably great Ezekiel Elliott is. And I think it's partly because of the suspension activity of last year, where you were never sure when it was going to come down. And so he was sort of playing in suspended animation, and you just were never, it was like he could be gone next week. And he ultimately was. And I think that he's a necessary, I'm not going to say crutch, but he's a necessary piece to Dak playing as he can. Now, our friend Des Bryant is gone. So I think though with the line, with Ezekiel Elliott, they lost the security blanket of Jason Witten. He left to go to the broadcast booth, which was kind of interesting and strange for the guy to be. And Jay Cutler did that last year, where it's like, hey, I'm weighing some offers, not from teams, but from Fox or whatever. So I do have him going 9-7 because I think Dak is better than maybe people give him credit for, and Zeke is absolutely elite if he is plugged in and ready to go. And again, when we go back to the Hard Knocks thing, do you watch All or Nothing, which is Amazon's in-season version of Hard Knocks?
I do not.
I am unbelievably impressed with the Dallas Cowboys, how things are run inside there. Watching this show, especially when you've seen the Cleveland Browns of the last couple of weeks, this thing is like the highest level corporation. And I know people could say, no, we want the nimble upstart thing. We want all this, but it is so high level in there. The facilities, and I'll tell you what, Jason Garrett as a CEO, quote CEO of a team, he's really, really impressive. I know people make fun of him. He runs a meeting at the highest levels. And then when you watch the Browns, and they got RVs for the quarterbacks, where the quarterbacks go when it's a break and they all sleep in the RV, you're like, come on, guys, this is different leagues. But I was really impressed with that. I was really impressed about how the Cowboys go about their business. And so I have them at 9-7. I think you have that line. They still have defense as long as Sean Lee plays. He's that Sean Livingston indispensable Pete's guy. Yeah, I think they'll go right where they were last year.
Yeah, I'm with you. I have them at 9-7 as well, and I feel like they have a very high floor. I feel like their floor is 8 wins. I know, which is weird that then I only have their ceiling at 9 wins, but I think it's going to be between Dallas and Philadelphia for the NFC East, and it'll be close. But I just have Dallas at 9-7, repeating last season, and just falling right outside of the playoffs. But I agree with everything you said. I mean, when you have an offensive line, when you have the running back, I mean, people are starting to question last season Dak Prescott, and has his game really matured and evolved as it needs to, as the team to move the team forward. And we'll see this season how that works out. But yeah, I just think it's they're in a tough division. I looked at their schedule. It's not the easiest schedule in the world. So, definitely, I said 8 wins is their floor. I just couldn't get myself to get them. I mean, I could get them to 10, but just the way it broke down when I did the game by game, it came out to 9. So I feel comfortable with that.
Yeah, I think if you don't have to, you don't push it, right? I mean, if it's 8.5, you're like, I'm good with 9 because I have some wiggle room that I'm willing to go with there. Next up, the Denver Broncos. This is an interesting one.
Yeah.
They won 5 last year, and they're at 7
Almost
this year.
Almost coach.
That's right. They're at 7 this year. I have them going 6-10. I just think that they're sort of a Jekyll and Hyde team, but the Jekyll and Hyde are two sides of the ball. The defense is elite, although it's been lessened a bit because Aqib Talib has gone to the Rams, to his old coach, Wade Phillips. But we talked about this last year. I think you can only kind of lean on a defense as long as you're able to put something up on the other end. It was like those old Giants arguments when the Giants had that unbelievable defense. I think it was early in the Michael Strahan time, and the offense was so bad that they were kind of openly sniping at each other. And that just destroys a team. And I think for you to put all of your eggs into Case Keenum's basket when Minnesota themselves were okay with moving on from him, they know what he is. We all know what he is. Again, in this all or nothing Hard Knocks world, I know Case Keenum as much as anybody because I saw a whole season of him with the Rams when he was the quarterback who relinquished his role to Jared Goff. And I give him all the credit in the world. This guy found a way. He was 5'0", 100 and nothing. Basically, not really. But this guy found his way to an $82 million contract. And I think maybe half of that guaranteed. I don't know. All the credit in the world. But I don't want to be the person who gives him the contract and he lands with me and you're all on him. I don't trust him in that role. I think he was nurtured in Minnesota. I don't think he was expected anything of. He was a backup. He signed on a minimum, and Sam Bradford went down, and all of a sudden you're all you got. And I think he's a psychology guy. When he knows there's no other choice, there's no other options, and when he can kind of build up in a team and he doesn't have to worry about someone trying to compete with him, he can do well kind of in a funnel. Like he can do well in a predetermined kind of path. And he even had the magic of that one crazy play against New Orleans in the playoffs. Other than that, he would have been out then. So he gets exposed. I don't think he's that different. And then they cut Paxton Lynch like yesterday or something, or the other day. I don't like that situation. So I have them at 6-10.
Yeah, I have them at 6-10 as well. I just thought they're not a 7-win team to me. Especially, I mean, the coach, they did keep him around, but that was not a calm, happy, productive locker room last season at all, if you believe anything you read. And so I think people were somewhat surprised that they brought him back, but happy to see him get a second chance. But I just don't think it's going to yield more than 6 wins. I don't have a lot of confidence about. I know it's hard to say. I mean, a team that was in the Super Bowl won the Super Bowl not that long ago with the defense that they had. Every decision they made since then just doesn't really resonate with me as being, all that just sound. I don't know what direction they're going in. And, again, there shouldn't be a reason to really doubt John Elway has, as an executive, taken them to 2 Super Bowls. But I don't know. I have a bad feeling about Denver. I mean, I have them at 6, but I could see them just winning 4. I could see things falling apart pretty easily there. And I'd be really surprised though if they go above 7. So 6 works for me.
Well, and why can't they get Colin Kaepernick in there? And then Elway came out and basically said we had him, and he didn't really want to come here. Why can't they? They just need a quarterback. That's all they need. It's and they tried to draft it in Paxton Lynch. They brought back Brock. They brought him back after he left them. They were able to get him on a nothing deal, but they just can't get a quarterback, and it's going to destroy what is an amazing advantage they have. Even when they had the corpse of Peyton Manning, they were able to win a Super Bowl with that defense. Just the audible, the default aspect where you think Peyton Manning could still be Peyton Manning, and he was able to keep him honest for a little bit. How can they not get a quarterback? How could they have not gotten Jimmy G in a deal? I guess it's the same conference, right? So that wouldn't have been a deal that the Patriots would have wanted to do. But God, I'd even take Jacoby Brissett at this point. I mean, and it's nothing against Case Keenum. He's done everything he needed to do. He got the job. He got the money. But man, Teddy Bridgewater, something. Get me something. They're going to die on the vine with this defense, It's years of this.
Well, maybe that is Teddy Bridgewater. Maybe he's the starting quarterback in 2019 for Denver.
Very possible. Or maybe Drew Brees goes there or something for 2 more years. That's the place where you go for when you're the racehorse to go out to pasture. Next up, Detroit Lions. They are just a team. They always kind of do more than you think they're going to do, but yet it's not enough. So they won 9 last year. Their number is 7.5 this year. A lot of people are high on them because a lot of people are look, Matthew Stafford is an elite quarterback, and elite quarterbacks will carry you to a certain level. I do have them going 9-7. I feel like that's the eternal kind of Detroit Lions posture. And they play in a really tough division, and their schedule's not amazingly easy. So I feel like giving them 9-7 is actually a pretty good number.
Yeah, I've got them slightly over at 8-8. So probably for the same reasons that you have them at 9-7. But again, when I went game by game, I just felt like they would have one more loss in there. New coach, obviously. I wanted Jim Caldwell to stick around, but didn't work out for him. I think he did a very good job in terms of stabilizing that franchise, and had more consistent success than I think any head coach in Lions history, if you can believe that. And I think so they're not a complete gut of a team where it's a tear down. You have to build it up from scratch. They do have something there to work with. And so we don't know what Patricia will be like as a head coach. He's obviously succeeded as a defensive coordinator. But even then, you're right, hard division, not the easiest schedule, some good talent. But to me, it just looks like 8-8. Still over. I mean, over the 7-5, but just not quite at your 9-7.
Yeah, it's funny. I think that they're probably an 8-8 team, but Stafford is good enough and he's paid enough to get you one more. And the amount of, what was it? I saw some statistic that was just unbelievable. 20 fourth quarter comebacks over the last 4 years for Stafford. Like, that's insane. I mean, he's a good quarterback. I mean, he's not our next team, Aaron Rodgers. He's not running a team like almost it doesn't matter what you have, or, Andrew Luck in his heyday. We'll see if he gets back there. But man, he's like right below there. He's like the 17-game winner year after year in baseball as a pitcher. It's just really good. He's like a super Kirk Cousins. I would definitely rather him than Kirk Cousins. Green Bay Packers are next. They won 7 last year because the aforementioned Aaron Rodgers wanted to get hurt and show them what they had without him. And, he has that scary broken collarbone thing, which didn't that take down Tony Romo too? And then once it breaks, it always breaks.
Yeah. Tony Romo was pretty brittle though.
He was, but I feel the collarbone is the type of thing that's just always brittle. Like once it's you know what I mean? Remember when you were a little kid and like you'd have that guy in school who always broke his collarbone? It just always went. So that worries me with quarterbacks. But Aaron Rodgers is back, of course. He got the huge deal. He's 35. I don't think that matters. I think it only makes him better at his job as long as he doesn't get the major terrible injury. And they're at a 10. That's as high. That's close to as high as you get in over-unders, because there's not a lot of wiggle room there to go over. So I do have him going over at 11-5, though. I think he's going to come back just absolutely loaded for Bear or loaded for Packer to kind of come back from last year, because he came back for like a game when they were still in contention and then went back out, right, when they lost. I forgot who they played last year, but I do remember that happening. So I think he's looking to reassert where he is, and I think he's going to lay waste to things. He got Jimmy Graham in there, who's going to be really fun to watch with him, and he can have nothing and do great. So I think we're going to see Jimmy Graham play like he did with Breeze, even though his best friend is Russell Westbrook. I always do that. Russell Wilson.
Russell. His best friend could still be Russell Westbrook.
It could be, yeah. Maybe he can play there, power forward. But I do have him going 11-5. I think it's a good position for that. They, of course, have a tough schedule, but they're a really good team, and they're a primetime team where the NFL wants them to play other primetime teams as well.
Yeah, I've got them at 10-6. You could talk me into 11-5, and I wouldn't give you a hard time. I just think, again, with their schedule being what it is, their roster, it's not a perfect roster. They could have used some help, probably more help than they got in certain spots. And, we'll see. So I think when we're counting on Aaron Rodgers to do a lot, and we should, if you told me that he's going to be the MVP this season, I'd buy it. And I'd sign up for that because he is tremendous. And, there's still enough talent there that they can win in a tough division. But I just have them. I have them at 10. And I have them in the playoffs, but not winning the division.
So Mike Pettin is back. Remember the old Jets coach and then the head coach of the Bills? He's been gone since 2015. Isn't it crazy how quick time goes by? And then the old Jet Muhammad Wilkerson is there. Yeah, so I think the Packers are going to be in pretty good shape. So they will be vying for things. And look, Rodgers sort of has to get another Super Bowl, right?
He doesn't have to. I mean, Brett Favre
not this
only
year,
got one.
But
Brett Favre only had one. He would be good for him to go to another Super Bowl at a minimum. And And there are some people who look at him and look at how he plays and put him like in the pantheon, and say that actually, like, if he maybe had another couple of Super Bowl wins, you would look at him mechanically and how he plays as being one of the all-time greats. And so to your point, yes, he probably needs to get a couple more signature victories in there, so then you can start having the conversation about him in the same way you do about an Elway or a Brady or a Manning. Right now I feel like people are like a little hesitant to quite put him in that category, even though how well he plays and how he has mastered the game and everything that he does so well, should justify those comparisons.
Yeah. Another guy who I think many are hoping will do a similar thing in the next decade or so is Deshaun Watson and the Houston Texans. Have you ever seen a guy who had such a quick burst of fame at the NFL level who went out and there's more of an expectation of him to be unbelievable than Deshaun Watson?
Yeah, no, and it's nice to see. People really, I think, just you would have thought that he had been on that team. Well, actually, it's not unlike in some ways when Teddy Bridgewater got injured with Minnesota, and Teddy Bridgewater had really been on the roster for maybe 2 seasons at that point.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of expectations of him heading into that season with that roster. And you just saw the life get drained out of that Minnesota team. And I think you kind of saw that as well with the Houston team, where it wasn't more than just you lost his production on the field. I think they felt like they had a field general, and they were kind of rudderless on the field, which is saying a great deal about a rookie who's only been playing 4 or 5 games at that point. So, yes, there's high expectations for them. They're at 8-5 on this. I have them getting 10 wins. I have them winning the AFC South. AFC South and getting 10 wins. So I'm buying into it.
I got 9, so I am on the over. And I've been convinced of there's got to be a little bit of regression as the league catches up with them. But can the league really catch up with a guy who was such a burst and then went out? Mm-hmm. But the things he did were almost magical, and even the opponents, the level that they would talk about him, it was just unbelievably impressive. So I definitely could see him going where you're saying. I just went 9 because that's all I needed to do to get it up over the over. And when I was going through it, I was like, look, is the defense dropping off just as he's ascending? Can we trust JJ Watt? I don't know if you need to, but they don't have an easy schedule, but no one does. But yeah, I saw 9, so I could definitely see 10 as well. But we'll kind of see. I mean, they're in the same, obviously, division as Jacksonville. So, maybe you're going to kind of flip on that one and go back to your original position on Jacksonville. But yeah, I think we're both on the over. And look, the NFL is in an amazing position where there's just really high-level quarterbacks around the league. And if we could just keep them healthy, if we can keep them off of the IR or the PUP list or whatever it is, that's the key, because how many of these Thursday night, Monday night, Sunday night games are you watching when there's no other games on, and it's like Tom Savage against Chad Henne, or you know what I mean? It's like it's not even worth it. You got the star power of the players there. It means everything. It's tremendous. So let's hope he comes back from that and does well. I think it's his second torn ACL though in his career. Actually, in college, he played on a torn ACL for a game because he needed to beat South Carolina. He said, I have to be undefeated. I promised I would be undefeated against South Carolina in my whole college career. So he played a game after he tore his ACL. It's like pretty unbelievable. Next up, this is the same division. It's funny how the alphabetical order, they end up, the next 3 are the same division. So Indianapolis, another case where you have the quarterback back, and you hope again, because this was also a collarbone situation, right? You hope they're back because, man, when Indianapolis doesn't have Andrew Luck, they are unwatchable. And that says a lot because Jacoby Brissett was not bad. When you think about the fact that New England had 3 guys on their roster in training camp last year who all started. and acquitted themselves well on NFL teams. But they're 6.5. They won 4 last year. It wasn't hard for me to get to 7-9. And I think with healthy Luck, when Andrew Luck is your quarterback, you really should always be in contention for 9 or 10. We forget how long he's been gone now. But he stepped into the NFL and won like 10 games 2 years in a row. So he's that good. He's that impactful. And so at 6.5, as long as he stays healthy, doesn't break that collarbone again, I'm going 7-9.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I'm at 7-9 just because of Andrew Luck, and maybe I'm buying too much into his return and what he can bring. But you're correct. I mean, he's, just ask Mike Francesa what he thinks of Andrew Luck. He's probably the biggest Andrew Luck fan, the side of Oliver Luck. But yeah, I think he will change that team. But still, I don't think they're going to be in contention for anything. They'll just be a 7-9 team, but it's a 7-9 team that could also easily be a 6-10 team, depending upon like how the game in Week 17 goes, or the game in Week 16 goes. You just don't know. But I don't see them playing for anything meaningful other than for that front office to know that they have Andrew Luck as their quarterback and can begin playing again around him, knowing that he's going to be there. And if you ask an Indianapolis Colts fan, if they tell you you'll have a healthy Andrew Luck for 16 games and you'll win 7 of them, they'd say, sign me up. So I think that's where they're going to be.
It's hard betting against Andrew Luck, though, being in the fourth quarter in a game up for grabs and him not taking it. He just does that when he's healthy. That's the only reason I think that he could get more wins. I just only went to 7 because that was all I had to. But like, there were points when I think when he initially got hurt and you saw basically the same exact team as he had, and it just fell off the face of the earth. Look at Peyton Manning before him. He was leading this team to like 12, 13 wins year after year. And the first year he gets hurt, they lost enough to get Andrew Luck. That was the first pick. So I just, transcendent quarterbacks carry bad rosters to 10 wins. And so I think the key is he healthy? That's it. And I'm not going to say they're 10 wins, but if he can get to 7, that's all you need. But it's hard to bet once he's healthy that he's not going to win games when they're up for grabs against the competitors he's going to be playing. When you're thinking Mariota face-to-face, he's going to beat Mariota. Hate to say it, he's going to beat Manning. He's just going to beat players. Think about it this way. Would you take him healthy over Wentz? Wouldn't you take him?
Well, I mean, also remember Wentz isn't healthy right now either, so it's tough to say.
Healthy. Both healthy. I feel like you have to take, and now they have the same coach, right? But he's really high level, and I think we've forgotten because he's been out so long. But you definitely take Darnold over him. Just kidding. But yeah, it means a lot when you look at a schedule with the confidence of the quarterback. It just means a lot. So we only need to be over 6.5, so we'll go there, but I wouldn't be surprised if he does more. Jacksonville. Let's see where I got them here. They obviously went to 10 wins last year. They've chirped up like they're a 13-win team the whole time. This year they're at 9 over under, and I actually have them at 9-7. So it is a push for me.
Yeah, I'm at 9-7 as well.
They got a tough schedule. I mean, who doesn't?
They do have a tough schedule. I have a 9-7, but 9-7 in the playoffs.
I think that's true. And Blake Bortles, I still don't know. I don't know. He's like, I feel like Blake Bortles has to win a Super Bowl and play well for us to be like, okay, I'll take Blake Bortles.
Maybe not, because there have been quarterbacks who've also been doubted and played well and won Super Bowls and then continue to get doubted. So I'm looking at you, Brad Johnson.
That is a good point.
I think, again, well-built team, well-run team. I don't like what you hear out of them. I agree with you.
Especially Jalen Ramsey. Man, this guy's just like won't shut up. And then I saw someone post about him, and I was like, boy, do you think Tom is sitting there cringing when he's saying what he says about Eli Manning? Like, Tom is in this position basically because of what he did in the time after he left Jacksonville, and it was because of Eli Manning.
Yeah. I mean, look, though, he's a great player. Jalen Ramsey is a terrific player. So even with what he says, I think the other 31 teams in the league would take him in a heartbeat. So you can't overlook that fact. And yeah, I think they're a well-built team, and they're built the right way. They're not like their defense is not, that defense isn't going anywhere. It travels well, it plays well. It's not going to drop off. So there are questions about the offense, and you just don't know. But I still think, all things in, they're a 9-win team, and in the playoffs with 9 wins.
Next up, we got the Kansas City Chiefs, who let Alex Smith go to the Washington Redskins, which is interesting. And they pretty much gave up the assurance of a 10 or 11 win team for the promise of a fireballer, of a guy who's doing mythological things with his arm, a son of a former major league pitcher, Pat Mahomes. And I actually have them going. So they won 10 last year. They're at 8.5 is the over-under. I have them going 10-6. One, because I think the Andy Reid infrastructure is just that, can be that important until the floor falls out, which it can, like 10 years in, but it could this year. It's always possible. But I think that infrastructure and the fact of how much skill is around this guy, and I'm kind of interested to see if Alex Smith was holding them back to a degree because of his inability to be as risky as he needs to, and his inability to hit guys at all times. You never know the ones you miss, right? You always talk about the counterfactuals. So I see them getting 10 wins because I also felt like their schedule, it felt kind of easy too.
Yeah, I think they'll get to 10 wins as well. I think it'll be 10 wins, but 10 wins that do not get them the division. I think they'll be a playoff team, but they won't win their division. I think the Chargers of Los Angeles will win their division. But for all the reasons you pointed out, I think Mahomes, he's a little bit of a wild card somewhat. It's because, Alex Smith, say what you want about him, he was consistent. And he brings more to the table as a quarterback than people really give him credit for. But I think there's still enough there, and Reid is such a good coach and runs such a good system. Even in an AFC West that's going to be competitive, I think they'll get the 10 wins and make the playoffs.
Next, we start our tour through Los Angeles. We got the Los Angeles Chargers first in alphabetical order. They won 9 last year, as we discussed. That was a rising 9, and they're at 9.5 this year. And for some reason, I wrote they're going 10-5, so I guess they're missing a game here. But
they are, yeah.
I'm going to guess that's going to automatically pick on the over. There's something about the Chargers that, especially of recent vintage, if we think 5, 6, 7 years, I don't trust prosperity with the Chargers. I never trust when people tell me they're the most stacked team in the league. They got all this skilled players. They got the greatest defensive players. And there's something that's always missing to me about Phillip Rivers. He's really good. But like when it comes down to it, that point where you can win championships, Eli's better there. And Eli's maybe not better in the other part, but he's better there. And I just haven't seen that Phillip Rivers has that part. That like, we're taking you on a run, and it could be all road games in this playoffs. We're taking you on a run to a Super Bowl. Now, a few players do that, especially twice like Eli did. But there's just something I don't trust about the Chargers when there's prosperity. They're playing in a 27,000-person stadium still. It's hard for me to sit there. I wouldn't put money on this, I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, they are one of the feel-good stories heading into the season where I'm almost nervous to give them the 10 wins I'm going to give them, just because those usually are the teams that let you down, and that they're not going to surprise anyone, so it would seem. But I think Andy Lynn's a good coach. I think what they went through last season it was a difficult transition that they went through. Very talented, both sides of the ball. Don't really have a lot of weaknesses on their roster. And I think they're going to get to 10 wins, and it's going to be 10 wins because of tiebreakers that win them the AFC West. So I think they'll be hosting a playoff game. And I hear what you're saying about Rivers and about prosperity, but I have it's a cautious 10 wins. I'm cautious about the optimism surrounding the Chargers this season.
It's almost like he needs to be playing with some kind of edge. You know what I mean? Like he needs to be like $10,000 down to get $20,000 up. It just always feels that way. Next up, the Los Angeles Rams. Talk about a team who has expectations on them. There's a lot of people who are saying LA Super Bowl. They won 11 last year. Their over-under is 10 this year. I wrote that I think they're going to go 11-5, but I don't feel overly confident. What we talked about with the mercenary aspect and the free agents, I know they have enough homegrown, but I'm afraid of how many people they've imported into this combustible potential mess.
Yeah, I mean, well, if you think about where they were 2 years ago and moving this team to LA and the type of franchise it was and the assets they had available to them, it didn't look like they would be anywhere close to the expectations that await them this season. So a lot of credit they deserve. I'm worried that the expectations are a little overheated for them for a number of the reasons that you pointed out in terms of importing that kind of talent and trying to integrate it. But I still think they'll be a 10-win team, and which is less than they had last year. But I still think that wins them their division and gets them to the playoffs. So, and from there we'll see what happens. But yeah, I mean, I don't think it was fool's gold last year what they did. I think it was legitimate. I just think that I'm taking a wait and see approach with some of the decisions they made in the offseason. I know in reading about it that they're not being complacent, that the head coach is McVay is really switching things up, and he's not resting on his laurels and trying to change up the offense, even though the offense was pretty successful last season. They're saying all the right things, doing all the right things. Probably the way they lost in the playoffs, maybe took some of the steam out of their own engines a little bit, because okay, wait, we do have more growth ahead of us. But yeah, I mean, I think 10 wins following 11 wins is successful. And I think it's reading the type of consistency that they need, and they'll be in the playoffs.
Yeah, I just
I'm not a 13-3 though. I'm not a 14-2. Yeah.
The amount of people they brought in is crazy. Marcus Peters, Akeem Talib, Ndamukong Suh. It's like, oh my God. It better go right this year. That's all I got to say. Next up, the Miami Dolphins, who are headed in the wrong direction. They had 6 wins last year with the Jay Cutler Experience, which is now a reality television show that it's the first starring role people love Jay Cutler in. They won 6. They're at 6.5. I have them going 5-11. I think they are the easiest bad team to see from a mile away.
Yeah, I'm at 5-11 too. Just their quarterback situation unsettled. Preseason, from what I understand, did not do anything to settle it. I agree with you. I mean, I was high on them last season. I shouldn't have been, and I look at the roster. They've got some holes, and they've a lot of holes and a lot of questions, which is not a combination that you want heading into the season. And that to me says 5-11.
Yeah, I would just hate. There's just not. But watch them go 11-5, right? That's the problem with the NFL. Minnesota Vikings. This is a fun one to talk about. Very polarizing discussion. So they won 13 last year. They're at 10 this year, and I see them going 10-6. But if I had to bet, I would potentially bet the under, because I am afraid to bet on Kirk Cousins at that level. It means nothing about how I feel about him as a quarterback. I give him so much credit for maximizing his value at every step of the way. But how, not happy, but how assured Washington was to just be rid of him. This guy who's put up numbers you can't believe, a quote-unquote franchise quarterback. They were okay with moving on from him for Alex Smith. That scares me, and I think he's in a position. He's another one of these guys who has to be in the psychological funnel to work right. Like things can't get let in. He almost can't be hurried at the line. Like he's got to be in the pocket. And if things go well, and if it's a full moon, he will get you 5,000 yards throwing, basically. But the minute things get a little tough, I get nervous with him. I mean, I remember, I feel like we've seen like 3 Washington Giants games, like night games, and we're never afraid of him playing him, ever. You feel like he's not going to beat you, even if he does. And so that part scares me, that now he's been imported to this Minnesota team, who I probably would have taken Teddy Bridgewater, but I guess that water's under the bridge. But that money...
no pun intended.
Yeah, that's right. That money, that expectation, this team is expecting to win a Super Bowl. Look, maybe he can shock me. And I still have him at 10-6, but as I said, I would probably bet the under if I had to bet it. I don't like this mix because I think they're sort of like a Denver. Now, I think Denver would be happier to have Kirk Cousins. But it's funny how they kind of swapped. So you can see the A/B test of Case Keenum was on Minnesota, 13-3. Now let's see him go to Denver, and Denver's like, well, we'll plug him in here. We have the same kind of defense. Let's see what we can do. And I think it's going to go the wrong direction. I think Kirk Cousins is. I just don't. It doesn't feel right to me. I don't like it. I don't like a team moving on from a quote unquote franchise quarterback in his prime. It just feels weird, doesn't it?
Well, I'm not as bothered by that. I just asked myself this question: would you rather have Case Keenum or Kirk Cousins as your quarterback? And I think you'd rather have Kirk Cousins, and I think that is worth, getting them to at least the number of wins they had last season. So I have them at 11-5.
Yeah,
I don't think. Yeah, I mean, I just don't think they've. I haven't seen enough depletion in other parts of the roster that says to me they're going to be markedly worse as a result of Kirk Cousins being there instead of Case Keenum. I think there'll be one game, it'll be about the same, which is 11-5.
Well, and Dalvin Cook's back, so that'll help a lot. No, they're a tremendously put together roster.
Very well coached.
I envy these kind of rosters when you look at them and you're like, why is ours so off kilter? And these teams are able to put together rosters that are just unbelievable.
Is Linval Joseph still there? I think he is.
Of course, yeah, of course he is. And so their front seven and their DBs are ranked number 1, both of them, both groups. I mean, that's just, and it tells you a lot that the QB is ranked 16th. So in the rankings of all QBs, Kirk Cousins is 16, or their quarterback group or whatever. So that's halfway, right? That's exactly halfway of the league. So
yeah, and I think that's good enough to stay where they were last season.
And they got Sheldon Richardson, by the way. Crazy. Next up, we got New England. New England, I felt good about last year because I was on the under. And remember, they started kind of sloppily, and then they overextended. So I feel like I'm not going to fall for that. They won 13 this year. Their over-under is 11. That is really high. I actually have them at 11-5. I probably would not bet on this one if I had the choice, because they should push at 11-5. Like that's the default New England year, but I don't know.
Yeah,
they don't have a lot of wide receivers there.
They don't have a lot of wide receivers. Some people are saying they should pay more attention to their offensive line than they should their wide receivers, because that's going to be that Brady will figure out how to bring his wide receivers around. But if this line isn't there, that's a bigger issue. I'm not going to bet against them. I mean, 11-5 is that's what they picked for. That's what I think they'll do. So whatever, until they prove me wrong, I'm just going to nod and go along with it. So 11-5, yes.
Yeah, I think you have to do that. Although, if I look at it, if you pick the over, you'll make money. So,
yeah, I'm not ready to go there.
No, absolutely not. Next up, we have the New Orleans Saints, who had sort of muddled along for several years before last year's resurgence, where they won 11 games, and now they're 9.5. So here they are. They have the great quarterback they have the great quarterback at an advanced age. I think in some ways, as a Giants fan, you're hoping Saquon Barkley does what Alvin Kamara did last year for New Orleans. They actually have a defense, and expectations are pretty high at a 9.5. Now, I did go to 10-6, although I could see them going 9-7 because there has to be a little bit of regression back to the old Saints, even if they're really good.
Yeah, this is a tough one because I have them in the playoffs at the number 6 seed. So whatever number gets them there, whether that's 10 or 9, if they can get 9 with the tiebreakers and they're in, fine. I'm comfortable with 9. But if they need to get to 10 to get in, then I'm okay with 10, if that makes any sense. Whatever it takes them to get the number 6 seed in the playoffs, I'm fine with that number.
Yeah, I think that's about right. I think the Kamara piece is huge because that just changes the whole dynamic.
The Kamara piece sounds like something from an Indiana Jones movie, by the way.
The Kamara piece.
They're trying to get the Kamara piece. It's like a MacGuffin.
Yeah. I mean, if the Giants get from Saquon Barkley what the Saints did from Kamara last year, that's an overwhelming success, right?
That would do it, yeah.
Yeah.
That's why they got him. That's why they drafted him.
So we talked Giants, who would be next. We talked Jets, who would be next. Now the fun one here. Oakland Raiders.
6-10.
It looked to me, so they were 6-10 last year. It still had an 8 spot here for this year, unless things have changed. But I was looking last night, so I still see an 8. I am extremely under. I feel like this is the old Raiders, and I think Gruden has just been unbelievably exposed through this process. I think to not understand that getting a $100 million 10-year contract wasn't going to be was going to be a problem, especially when you got major players ready for contracts. I mean, the whole thing is so crazy to me that I feel like this has to fail successfully, or not successfully. It has to fail and at the highest levels of failure. This has to blow up so bad that you're thinking about firing him in year 1 of a 10-year deal. I saw some crazy quote that you almost would have thought was the Onion, where it was he wanted too much money, and you're like, really? Oh my God. And the crazy part is, you understand how the Raiders got themselves into this spot. They had to pay him more than ESPN was paying him, which was already absurd. They were paying him $7 million a year to be an announcer. So the only way you're going to get him out, if you really want him, is to go markedly higher than that. And so they did, and look what it did. So I have them way under, and I don't even know how 8 is a distinct possibility in any way.
That may have been before they traded Khalil Mack, though. The 8 wins.
Well, I was looking at that, but it didn't. You would think they would update by now, though, right?
They should. So I would say I got them at 6-10. Again, yeah, I don't think you should like anything that you're hearing out of the Raiders. I don't think the locker room is all that happy about the Khalil Mack trade. It doesn't send a good message to the team, where if you play at an extraordinarily, historically high level, we'll trade you. That's kind of the message that sends to the Oakland Raiders left behind. And it's a team in transition that's going to be going. I'm not high on what they've done, so I think 6-10 and somewhere Jack Del Rio is smiling.
Well, you know what? And I just saw that was as of August 27th, so that must be who's got the updated lines though. Someone must. Jeez, I wonder what that would have been dropped to. But again, Khalil Mack is unbelievable from everything you hear, and you'll see the games in the highlights where it's oh my God, he got 4 sacks today. But did he markedly improve them from being what they
6 to 8 wins,
right? I mean, that's the hard part. I don't know.
Well, I did read this somewhere, so this is not my theory, but, you need to maybe start thinking about your best defensive player, a player who has the impact that a Khalil Mack does in the same way you would your quarterback in some ways. So if Derek Carr went out, you would immediately start discounting 2 wins, if not more, from Oakland's projected win total. So why not do the same with Khalil Mack?
Yeah, you build around him too. Mm-hmm. Philadelphia Eagles. They won 13 on the magic carpet ride to a Super Bowl. They're at 10. I don't know if it's just being in this division and being a Giants fan. I have a hard time giving the Eagles the respect. Same thing with the Phillies as a Mets fan. I have a hard time giving them the respect of an over. And I think plus the schedule, I actually weirdly have them going 9-7.
Okay, I have them at 10-6, and they surprised me last year a great deal. They lost their offensive coordinator. They also lost their quarterbacks coach, right?
Filippo, D. Filippo.
Yeah, D. Filippo, and but I still think that there's they played so well, and it wasn't like they went on a run, a fluky kind of run. I think they are a solid team, and I think 10-6 is right. I think that gets them to the playoffs and they win the division.
Yeah, and I mean, there's always that potential hangover after winning it. Although I think not having your starting quarterback be a part of that is an amazing benefit, right? Because he's not going to have a hangover. And what were there, 4 or 5 guys who tore their ACLs last year who were major players on the team? Who were all out, so they're coming back. So maybe in a weird, perverse way, that's a nice thing for this year's morale.
It's getting a nice little injection.
Next, Pittsburgh Steelers. This is always a tough one. They won 13 last year. They're at 10.5, and I do have them going by the skin of my teeth at 11-5 because I just think it's hard to not get there with how loaded they are. I mean, they're unbelievably loaded. But we'll have to see if Le'Veon Bell plays at a high level with his contract issues. But yeah, I have a hard time, I think, with the fact they can play Cleveland twice and that they should beat up on their division. They also have Tampa Bay, which isn't scary. They're at Denver.
I got them 11-5 too. So I think they're my pick for the Super Bowl as well. They are loaded. You're right. This might be like the most loaded Pittsburgh team. Usually Pittsburgh's like a gritty team that plays well in the trenches, where they've just got such a loaded offense. And I'm a Tomlin fan. I think he's there every season, gets them where they need to be, and I think 11-5 is reasonable. And I think they're going to go to the Super Bowl. So.
It's kind of funny how Pittsburgh and the Giants are thought of in a lot of the same lineage, right? And
because the Maras and the Rooney family.
Yeah, but I mean, even the way that they're built in their Super Bowl runs feel somewhat similar. Trenches and I think now they're all skill positions, both teams. It's kind of weird. Next up, another team who's in a similar spot with lineage, the San Francisco 49ers, who got Jimmy G and all is good, and they ended up winning 6, but they won the last 5 of the year, and
they would have been quarterback.
They would have been a scary out if they were able to make it into a playoff. They've jumped up to 8.5, and I do have them just on the over at 9-7. It'll be interesting to see how much Jimmy actually means when people are game planning for him.
Yeah, I think that 9-7 is about right. It will be interesting to see. As I said, he's never lost a game before as a starting quarterback. He's won all of his games with New England and won all of his games with San Francisco. I don't think he's going to win every game this season. But they've made other good moves too. And even before he got there, they seemed like they were making good moves. And, that's a roster when you think about what was going on with that roster within the last 3 years with like all the sudden retirements that they went through. you had the
They lost their will almost.
Yeah. Well, you had you had Harbaugh leaving, and his last season wasn't a great season. And then, the ill-fated, oh my God, I can't
Jim
remember.
Tomsula.
Yeah, Tomsula. I feel so bad for him. Apparently very well liked, but it just didn't go his way. So, I think they stole Weston Richburg from the Giants. I think that's a good move. I think they're moving in the right direction, and I think the right direction this year is 9-7 for them.
I think Seattle's not moving in the right direction, but they've had quite a run. In many ways, they kept the band together and had the run that San Francisco maybe should have had over all these years. And they won 9 last year. They missed the playoffs, and they're at 8 this year. I tallied it up, and I want to be higher, but I have them going 8-8, and I think that's because they have still a tremendous quarterback who can overcome the deficiencies of a line because of the way he plays. But their schedule was not very friendly when I was reading it over.
Yeah, 8-8 I think is right. I think you could talk me into 9-7 because of what they still have there. They're not entirely barren, but 8-8 is good. I mean, NFC West is it's a tough division. Especially if Arizona can in any way replicate what they did under Arians. You got to fight for some wins there, and it's hard to bet against Russell Wilson. I think, or Russell Westbrook for that matter. But I think
maybe if they got Dede Westbrook.
I think I read Peter King is saying, yes, I think Peter King is saying, was reading, look out, they could be a surprise team. Nobody should take them lightly, and we could be talking about them, playoffs and maybe beyond. I'm not quite ready to go there with them, but 8-8 sounds about right. And, if they go to 9-7, that would also sound about right, but I'm not going to go above that right now.
I would also not be shocked if, because of their pedigree, if we're at, Thanksgiving and they are several games over 500 and the Rams are middling, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Because it's just hard to bet against what you've seen from Russell Wilson. It's just hard. And that if it's much like how I feel with Luck, if he's there and there's a game to be had and you know who your team is and you know who you have, and you have to hope that who you've put together will be good moving forward. You just have to think that it's going to work. And I have a hard time making Andrew Luck or Russell Wilson or a handful of other like-minded quarterbacks. I have a hard time going 8-8 with them because it just doesn't feel normal. It doesn't feel right for them to just be that mediocre as long as they're on the field the whole time. So, I go through it and that's where I ended up, but it just, I don't know. At the end of a year, I feel like it's pretty polar in the direction they go in. It's either they're a 9 or a 10 win team, or they got hurt and the team fell apart. Which is not the case, as we've seen with the third to last team. Is there a penultimate type word for that? I don't think so. Is it a tri-ultimate? Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I think we've seen that Jameis Winston is not an elite quarterback. They won 5.
We won't see that for the first 4 games of the season, will we?
Right. Because of Uber. Jeez. So they won 5 last year, and they're at 6.5 this year. And I am completely out on Tampa Bay. I have them at 4-12.
Okay, I'm at 5-11, and I think Dick Cotter.
Cotter, welcome. Go home, Cotter.
Yeah, I think somewhere in Urbane, Illinois, Lumpy Smith is laughing. But
oh God.
Yeah, so I'm not high on them at all. You don't the off season. You don't like what you heard coming out of there in the off season. They didn't have a great season last year. There's not really much reason to be hopeful looking at that squad.
Maybe Jim Harbaugh there, although that's not enough of a blue blood type of team, I think, for him to go to. But yeah, there's not. Things looked good on that Hard Knocks last year, and man, that deceived me. That's why I keep wondering, will Cleveland come out and go 10-6 after seeing how bad this Hard Knocks is?
Mm-hmm.
Terrible. Tennessee. They just do enough to overproduce. They won 9 last year. They went to the playoffs. They won that crazy game in Kansas City. And they're at an 8 this year. I don't know. Speaking of, it's funny, the tie-ins with the alphabetical order, because we went at the top 2 in that draft with Jameis Winston, now to Marcus Mariota. I don't know if either of them has shown that they're a highest of level of quarterback in the league. And they're a nice team, though. They're sort of Detroit-ish. Like, they're a nice team. It's not necessarily a team you would want as your team, but they're a nice team. They're the team that could. They're like the Thomas Tank Engine. And he's just not Matthew Stafford, though. So I see them going 7-9. I like what he does. I'm impressed when he has the opportunity in jump ball situations to win a game or to not. But I think on the whole, playing out a season, he's just not the highest level quarterback. So I have them going 7-9.
Yeah, I have them at 8-8, which is what the number is. But I could also see them I could see them anywhere from 7-9 to 9-7. Same thing. Like, I could see them going to MetLife Stadium in December and, playing for the division. Mm-hmm. Or I could see them playing for nothing at that point. I don't know. You got Mike Vrabel there in his first year as head coach, so that'll be interesting to see. Is that
where DiFilippo went?
That's a good question. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't really. Tennessee doesn't really move the needle for me one way or the other. Like, they're not, as I've read about them, there are no glaring weaknesses, but there's nothing on their roster that really gets you excited. So, that's a team that probably won't really let you down, but probably also won't necessarily carry you to any great heights. So, 8-8 sounds right to me.
John DiFilippo went to the Minnesota Vikings.
Okay.
And Titans is Matt LaFleur. That doesn't seem right, though. I guess so. January 30th, 2018, yeah. He was the Rams offensive coordinator, which, of course, isn't a true offensive coordinator. It's like Ben McAdoo being the offensive coordinator of of Green Bay. It's really the head coach calling all those plays. Last but not least, a real tough place to end with the least. But hey, they got a good offensive line.
That's true.
The Washington Redskins, who are they won 7 last year. They're at 7 this year. And I have them going 6-10. But they're a nice team. They're a nice team, but I have them going 6-10. I almost want them to do better, even though they're in the Giants division, because I feel bad when teams discard Alex Smith and they're like, we can do better. And then he just comes back from the dead and just continues to win games. So I wouldn't mind seeing more. He's just a very steady hand. But I do have him going 6-10 because someone has to get some losses.
Yeah, I have him 6-10 as well for a lot of the same reasons. I think I may have had him 6-10 last season as well. Nothing to really, get excited about. Nothing to really, be too concerned about. But I just don't think that they have pieces there that will move them anywhere other than just sort of 6-10, 7-9-ish. That's about it. They have some flaws. They have Adrian Peterson. So that tells you what they had in their running game.
That's true.
To begin the season, preseason. Good offensive line, which is always something to build on. But otherwise, no. I mean, it's funny that when you have a team that's in your division and a team that has been historically, very, very good, that you don't really know that much about or think that much about or care that much about. It's strange to me. But that's kind of the way I feel about the Redskins. It's like, oh, okay, that's right. The Redskins are in the Giants division. But, so I think 6-10 is about as most as one can expect from this season.
All right, we went through. Now we'll just close it real quick on our playoffs. So I thought the interesting way to look at this would just be to look at last year's 12 and just say in or out. So Philadelphia Eagles, I would say they're in.
I think they're in.
Minnesota Vikings are probably in.
I'm in.
The Los Angeles Rams would probably be in.
Yes.
The Saints.
I have them in.
The Panthers.
I do not have them in.
The Falcons.
I have them in.
And then we have, of those left, Green Bay is, I'm guessing, going to be in there. So that means San Francisco's not in.
No, I had them. It was actually between New Orleans and San Francisco for me, and I lean towards New Orleans.
No Detroit, no Seahawks. That's interesting. Okay. Mm-hmm. So there's, I guess it's not a lot of, there's one in or out in that one. And then we have the AFC. The Patriots are, of course, in. Mm-hmm. The Steelers are in. The Jaguars, you think they're not in?
I'm in. I have them in, but not winning the division. So that's my wild card.
And then the Chiefs?
I have them in. They're my 6th seed.
The Titans?
I do not have them in.
Or the Bills?
I do not have them in.
You don't think the Bills are making a run on this thing?
No.
So that means we have the Chargers.
I have them in.
Not to the Ravens, right? You don't see them. Cincinnati?
No.
Okay, so who is... Oh, Indianapolis? Or Houston? Houston. Wow, that's crazy. So it's going to look like teams flip the script from year to year, but it's really almost injuries, because you could almost see Houston or Indianapolis, who are second and 2 out of the bottom 3 there, could be in the mix. There actually could be... The AFC has the chance to have a lot more... change up to this year.
Yeah, I could see that. It was tough for me to pick like the last team. You know, I was thinking Kansas City. I thought maybe Tennessee. I thought Cincinnati, but ultimately I just went with Andy Reid in Kansas City. I
can't believe the Giants are down there. Wow. Can you imagine going into a season where you don't see them going to the playoffs? Wow. And they spent this much on Beckham. Did you like that move?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
I had no problems with that. I know a lot of people, at least on talk radio, wanted him shipped out, but I don't think so. And I think they played it very, very intelligently, which is, both sides did, which is they wanted to get a look at him up front, see how he would respond to the situation, in the negotiations. And I think he did all the right things and said all the right things, and he's been rewarded. So,
well, he was only snorting B12, right?
Yes,
but. Like the funny thing is when these things happen, I love when all of a sudden callers into talk radio are salary cap gurus, and it's like we're going to be hamstrung, but yet they're paying PSLs and all this stuff. It's like, no, just pay him, just get him. Mm-hmm. And look, a lot's guaranteed, but it's not our money. Who cares? I mean, ultimately to a degree is, but who cares? Like, so you're going to die on your hill when you let go of him, and then you have like 2nd and 3rd round picks in 3 years. Like, come on. But yeah, that's a bit of you sign him up long term, you keep Saquon Barkley. The narrative aspect, I just have a hard time going into a season not picking them to be in the playoffs. It just feels weird.
Well, maybe they'll surprise us then.
They kind of have to, and there they are at the way bottom. All right, and then you said Super Bowl, you have the Steelers and the
Vikings.
The Vikings. Steelers, Vikings in Atlanta.
Yes.
Wow. I guess the league would like the Steelers, but yeah, all right. I don't know who I have. I haven't thought that far. So it's hard enough with the over-unders. Yeah. I don't know. I'll have to think a little more about that. You're on the hook for that one.
Okay.
And we'll pick up.
In several months, we will all learn how poorly I did. So.
Yeah, a nice 2-hour test here.